If you're about to witness what happens behind the most classified walls in America, then smash that subscribe button, hit the bell, and drop a comment telling me if you'd survive even one day in this place. Because what you're about to hear will chill you to the bone. The convoy moved like a funeral procession through the Colorado plains. 3 armored vehicles, no markings, no sirens, just the hum of engines cutting through the pre-dawn silence. Inside the middle truck, a man sat shackled at the wrists, ankles, and waist. His name was Marcus Hale, and he had just become inmate number 790 at the Administrative Maximum Facility, ADX Florence. The only Supermax prison in the United States. The place where America buries its nightmares. Hale didn't speak. He didn't need to. His face, scarred and hollow, told the story of a man who had orchestrated one of the most brutal crime rings the FBI had ever dismantled. Kidnapping, torture, extortion. 17 victims over 6 years. But that wasn't why he was being transported with this level of security. It was what he knew. Names, dates, locations. Information that could topple criminal empires and corrupt officials across 3 states. Information that made him the most valuable and most dangerous prisoner in the system. The gates of ADX Florence loomed ahead like the mouth of some mechanical beast. Concrete walls rose 30 feet high, crowned with razor wire that glinted in the pale morning light. Guard towers stood at each corner, manned by figures whose faces remained invisible behind tinted glass. This wasn't a prison. It was a tomb for the living. Hale was led through a series of steel doors, each one slamming shut behind him with a finality that echoed down the narrow corridors. The air inside was cold, sterile, suffocating. No windows. No natural light. Just the hum of ventilation systems and the distant clang of metal on metal. He was stripped, searched, and dressed in a grey jumpsuit that bore no identification except a number stenciled across the back. His cell was 7 by 12 feet. A concrete bed bolted to the floor. A stainless steel sink and toilet combination. A narrow slit of a window, 4 inches wide, positioned so high he couldn't see anything but a sliver of sky. 23 hours a day, he would be here. Alone. No human contact except for the guards who slid his meals through a slot in the door. This was the protocol for every inmate at ADX Florence. Total isolation. Total control. But Marcus Hale wasn't just any inmate. 3 days into his sentence, something strange happened. A correction officer named Daniel Ruiz noticed it first. Hale's meal tray had been returned untouched. That alone wasn't unusual. Men broke down in ADX. They stopped eating, stopped speaking, stopped being human. But Ruiz had been watching Hale closely. The man was too calm, too focused. He wasn't breaking. He was waiting. Ruiz reported it to his supervisor, Captain Elena Voss, a 20-year veteran of the Bureau of Prisons who had seen every kind of criminal pass through these walls. She pulled Hale's file and began reading. What she found made her blood run cold. 3 weeks before his arrest, Hale had met with an unknown individual in a diner outside Pueblo. The meeting had been flagged by surveillance but never fully investigated. The FBI had been too focused on closing the case. But now, inside the most secure prison in America, Voss began to wonder if they had missed something critical. She ordered a full cell search. 2 officers entered Hale's unit while he was in the shower. They tore apart the mattress, inspected every inch of concrete, checked the plumbing. Nothing. But as they were leaving, one of them noticed something odd. The air vent cover had faint scratches around the screws. Fresh scratches. They removed the cover. Inside, tucked into the ductwork, was a small piece of paper. Folded once. No writing on the outside. Voss took it to her office and unfolded it under a desk lamp. What she saw made her hands tremble. It was a hand-drawn map of the prison. Not the public layout. The real one. Service tunnels. Guard rotations. Blind spots in the camera system. And at the bottom, written in tiny, precise letters, were 4 words. They are already inside. Voss looked up from the paper, her mind racing. If this was real, if someone had smuggled this information into ADX Florence, then the most secure prison in America had been compromised. And Marcus Hale wasn't the prisoner. He was the bait. She reached for her phone to call the warden. But when she looked at her computer screen, she froze. The security camera feed from Hale's cell block had gone black. Captain Elena Voss sprinted down the corridor, her boots echoing against concrete walls that suddenly felt less like protection and more like a maze designed to trap her. Behind her, 2 officers struggled to keep pace as she barked orders into her radio. Lock down cell block H. Now. I want every guard accounted for and every inmate visual confirmed. Static crackled back. Then silence. She tried again. Control, do you copy? Nothing. They reached the security hub, a reinforced room filled with monitors that should have displayed every angle of ADX Florence. Instead, half the screens showed nothing but black. The other half flickered with frozen images. Timestamp stuck at 3:17 a.m. The guard on duty, a younger officer named Stevens, sat pale-faced at his desk, hands hovering uselessly over keyboard. I don't understand, he stammered. The system just died. All of it. Cameras, door controls, everything on the automated grid. Voss felt ice crawl up her spine. ADX Florence ran on redundant systems, backups upon backups, designed by engineers who had studied every prison break in history. A total failure like this wasn't just unlikely. It was impossible. Unless someone had planned it from the inside. Manual override, she snapped. Get those doors locked down manually. And find me Daniel Ruiz. But even as she gave the order, Voss knew they were already too late. Somewhere in this facility, in the one place in America where criminals disappeared forever, someone was making their move. 20 floors below, in the bowels of ADX Florence where even most guards never ventured, a different drama was unfolding. The service tunnels were a necessity, channels for plumbing, electrical, and ventilation that kept the prison functioning. They were also supposed to be inaccessible, sealed behind locked grates and monitored by motion sensors. Daniel Ruiz moved through them now with the confidence of someone who had walked this route before. He had been a corrections officer at ADX for 8 years. Trusted. Reliable. The kind of employee who volunteered for extra shifts and never complained about the soul-crushing monotony of guarding men in concrete boxes. The kind of employee no one would ever suspect. He reached a junction point where 3 tunnels converged and checked his watch. 3:21 a.m. Right on schedule. From the darkness ahead, another figure emerged. Tall, lean, wearing maintenance coveralls that looked official enough to pass a casual glance. But this wasn't a maintenance worker. This was Adrian Cole, a man who didn't officially exist in any Bureau of Prisons database, but whose fingerprints told a different story. Ex-military. Ex-intelligence. Current employer, the highest bidder. We have a problem, Ruiz whispered, his voice tight. Voss found the map. Cole's expression didn't change. Doesn't matter. By the time she figures out what's happening, we'll be gone. Is he ready? Ruiz nodded. Cell 47. But if we're doing this, we do it now. She's already ordered a lockdown. They moved quickly through the tunnels, climbing a maintenance ladder that led to a service corridor running parallel to cell block H. This was the genius of the plan. ADX Florence was designed to prevent inmates from escaping to the outside. But the architects had never considered someone breaking in to extract a prisoner from within. Cole pulled a small device from his pocket and attached it to an electrical panel. 30 seconds later, the electromagnetic locks on cell 47 disengaged with a soft click. The door slid open 6 inches. Just enough. Marcus Hale stepped out, his movements calm and unhurried, as if he'd been expecting this all along. Because he had. Every moment since his arrest had been choreographed. The information he possessed wasn't just valuable. It was a death sentence. And the people who wanted him silenced weren't going to wait for some prison murder that might be investigated. They needed him out. Dead or alive, but preferably where they could control the narrative. We have 8 minutes before the backup generators restore full power, Cole said. After that, every door in this place becomes a steel trap. They moved as a unit back through the service corridor, Ruiz leading the way. But as they descended the ladder into the tunnels, a sound stopped them cold. Footsteps. Multiple sets. Coming from both directions. Voss had figured it out faster than they'd anticipated. She'd pulled the facility blueprints and seen what her predecessors had missed. The service tunnels weren't just maintenance access. They were a vulnerability. And she'd sent teams to seal both ends. Cole pulled a weapon from beneath his coveralls. We go through them. But Ruiz grabbed his arm. Wait. There's another way. He pointed to a narrow pipe channel overhead, barely 3 feet in diameter. Emergency drainage. Leads to the water treatment facility outside the main wall. It's a 1/4-mile crawl, but it's unmonitored. Hale looked at the opening and then back at Cole. They'll know we went this way. They'll have people waiting at the other end. Cole smiled, cold and predatory. Then we make sure they're looking in the wrong place. He turned to Ruiz. How fast can you get back to your post? Ruiz understood immediately. 5 minutes if I move now. Do it. Make it look like you were responding to the alarm. When they ask if you've seen anything, tell them you saw movement in Tunnel C, heading toward the north perimeter. Give us 15 minutes. Ruiz hesitated for only a second before nodding. He disappeared back the way they'd come, his footsteps fading into the darkness. Cole and Hale climbed into the drainage pipe. It was tight, suffocating, the metal cold against their skin. Behind them, they could hear shouting now, orders being barked, the prison waking up to the reality that the impossible was happening. They crawled for what felt like hours but was only 12 minutes. When they finally emerged into the water treatment facility, Cole checked his phone. 1 message. 2 words. Car ready. They climbed out into the night air, the lights of ADX Florence blazing behind them like a small city under siege. A black SUV idled 50 yards away, headlights off. They were almost to the vehicle when Hale stopped. Wait, he said quietly. Cole turned. What? Hale was staring back at the prison, his expression unreadable. Ruiz. He doesn't know, does he? Know what? That you're going to kill him. Cole didn't answer. He didn't need to. The plan had always been to eliminate loose ends. Ruiz thought he was getting paid and relocated. He had no idea that a team was already moving into position at his apartment, waiting for him to return home after his shift. But that wasn't what made Hale stop. It was something else. Something he'd seen in Cole's eyes when they first met in the tunnel. Recognition. Not of Hale. Of someone else. You're not here to extract me, Hale said slowly. You're here to make sure I never talk. Cole's hand moved toward his weapon. But before he could draw it, the night exploded with searchlights. 3 helicopters rose from behind the prison walls, their spotlights painting the ground in harsh white circles. And surrounding them, emerging from the darkness like ghosts, were 24 federal agents, weapons raised. At the center of them stood Captain Elena Voss. And beside her, very much alive, was Daniel Ruiz. Voss's voice cut through the roar of helicopter blades. Adrian Cole, Marcus Hale, you're under arrest. Again. But as the agents moved in, Hale began to laugh. A sound so cold, so genuinely amused, that even Voss felt a chill. You really think this is over? Hale called out. You think I'm the only one? Check your prison, Captain. Check cell block D, cell 93. His smile widened in the searchlights. Because the man you've been looking for wasn't trying to get me out. He was already inside. The words hung in the air like poison. Voss felt her stomach drop as she processed what Hale had just said. She grabbed her radio, her hands suddenly unsteady. Control, I need immediate visual confirmation on cell block D, cell 93. Now. The agents were already securing Cole and Hale, zip ties cutting into wrists, but Voss couldn't focus on the victory in front of her. Something was wrong. Something had been wrong from the very beginning, and she'd been too focused on stopping the escape to see the larger picture. Her radio crackled. It was Stevens, his voice shaking. Captain, cell 93 it's empty. The door's open. I don't know how long it's been like this. The cameras have been down. Who was in that cell? Voss demanded, already running back toward the prison. Give me a name. There was a pause. The sound of frantic typing. Then Stephen spoke again, and his voice had gone completely flat. Thomas Marsh. Convicted 8 years ago for the murder of federal prosecutor Catherine Wells. But Captain, his file, there's almost nothing here. Most of it's classified above my clearance level. Voss's blood turned to ice. She knew that name. Every veteran law enforcement officer knew that name, even if they'd never spoken it aloud. Thomas Marsh hadn't just killed a prosecutor. He'd been a CIA asset who'd gone rogue, a man who knew where bodies were buried across 3 continents. A man who'd been locked away not because of what he'd done, but because of what he knew. The kind of prisoner who made Marcus Hale look like an amateur. She reached the prison entrance, agents flooding in behind her. Locked down every exit. Ground the helicopters. Nobody leaves this facility until we find him. But even as she gave the orders, Voss knew they were pointless. A man like Thomas Marsh didn't escape on impulse. He planned. And if he was gone, he'd had hours, maybe days, to disappear. They reached cell block D in under 3 minutes. The door to cell 93 stood open, and inside, the concrete box was pristine. Too pristine. The bed was made with military precision. The small desk held a single item, a photograph. Voss stepped inside and picked it up, her hands trembling. It was a picture of her. Taken 3 weeks ago outside her daughter's school in Denver. The message was clear. Marsh knew who she was. Knew where her family was. And he wanted her to know that he could reach them anytime he wanted. Ruiz appeared in the doorway, his face pale. Captain, we've got something else. The guard rotations for the past month. Someone's been altering them in the system. Small changes, nothing obvious, but enough to create gaps. Windows where certain areas went unmonitored. Who had access to modify those rotations? Voss asked, though she already suspected the answer. Senior staff only. Warden, deputy warden, and... Ruiz's voice trailed off as his eyes met hers. And you, Captain. The implication hit her like a physical blow. Someone was setting her up. The map found in Hale's cell, the security failure, now this. Every piece of evidence pointed back to her. If Marsh had escaped during her watch, with her access codes potentially compromised, she wasn't just going to lose her job. She was going to prison. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Against her better judgment, she answered. The voice on the other end was calm, cultured, almost friendly. Thomas Marsh. Captain Voss. I imagine you're having quite the evening. Where are you? She demanded, her voice low and dangerous. Somewhere you'll never find me. But that's not really the question you should be asking, is it? You should be asking why. Why did I wait 8 years? Why did I choose tonight? Why did I let you catch Cole and Hale? Voss said nothing, her mind racing through possibilities. Marsh continued, Marcus Hale is a useful idiot who thought he was too valuable to kill. Adrian Cole is a mercenary who took money from people who don't like loose ends. But me. I'm the ghost in the machine. Captain. I've been moving pieces on this board for 3 years. Guards transferred in. System upgrades installed with hidden backdoors. All leading to tonight. What do you want? Voss asked. I wanted out. And I wanted you to be blamed for it. Nothing personal, but someone needs to take the fall, and I needed the distraction. By the time your superiors finish investigating you, I'll be in a country that doesn't have an extradition treaty, living under a name that will never be connected to Thomas Marsh. We'll find you, Voss said, but even she could hear the hollow certainty in her voice. Marsh laughed softly. No, you won't. But you will find something else. Check the maintenance logs for cell block H, April 14th. You'll see a work order for electrical repairs, signed off by a contractor named James Sullivan. Run that name through facial recognition. The line went dead. Voss stood frozen for a moment, then ran back to the security hub. She pulled up the maintenance logs, found the date, found the work order. The signature was there, neat and professional. She uploaded the contractor's ID photo to the recognition software. The match came back in seconds. Her screen filled with a face she recognized. Not James Sullivan. Daniel Ruiz. She turned slowly to look at the man who'd been standing beside her all night. The man who'd supposedly helped her stop the escape. The man who'd been working at ADX Florence for 8 years. The same 8 years Thomas Marsh had been imprisoned. Ruiz met her eyes and smiled sadly. "I'm sorry, Captain. I really am. But you have to understand. They have my sister. They've had her for 3 years. Every week, I get a photo proving she's still alive. Every week, I do what they tell me. Tonight was supposed to be the end of it. Help Marsh get out, and they let her go." "And you believed them?" Voss asked, her voice barely a whisper. Ruiz's smile crumbled. "I had to believe them. What else could I do?" Before Voss could respond, Ruiz pulled a small device from his pocket. A dead man's switch. His thumb was already on the trigger. "There are charges placed throughout the service tunnels. Marsh's insurance policy. If anyone came too close to figuring it out, the whole section collapses. Buries the evidence. Buries anyone investigating." "Don't do this," Voss said, but she could see in his eyes that he'd already made his choice. "Tell my sister I tried," Ruiz said. Then he released the switch. The explosion was deep and muffled, but the floor beneath them shuddered. Emergency alarm screamed to life. Voss grabbed Ruiz, dragged him away from the collapsing tunnel section, even as she knew it was already too late to save most of the evidence. Marsh had planned for everything. 3 hours later, as dawn broke over Colorado, Voss stood outside ADX Florence watching federal investigators swarm the facility. Hale and Cole were in custody, but their lawyers were already building cases. Ruiz was in a medical unit, sedated, facing charges that would keep him locked up for life. And somewhere, Thomas Marsh was boarding a plane to a life of freedom that most people could only dream of. But as Voss turned to leave, her phone buzzed one final time. Another unknown number. Another message. This one wasn't a call. It was a photo. A woman, mid-30s, sitting in what looked like a cafe. Alive. Smiling nervously at the camera. The timestamp was from 20 minutes ago. And the location tag showed a city in Brazil. Ruiz's sister. Alive. Free. Marsh had kept his word after all. Voss stared at the photo for a long moment, then deleted it. Some truths were too complicated to share. Some stories didn't have heroes and villains, just people making impossible choices in a system designed to break them. She walked to her car, exhausted, knowing that when she got home she'd hug her daughter a little tighter. Because the real secret of ADX Florence, the one they'd never tell the public, was simple. The walls weren't there to keep the monsters in. They were there to hide the fact that monsters were already everywhere. And sometimes, the only thing separating the guards from the prisoners was which side of the door you happened to be standing on. 6 months later, a body washed up on a beach in Thailand. Dental records would eventually identify it as Thomas Marsh. Cause of death: single gunshot wound to the head. No suspects. No witnesses. Just another ghost who'd learned too late that some secrets are only safe if you take them to your grave. And in a small apartment in Sao Paulo, a woman who'd been missing for 3 years opened her mailbox and found an envelope with no return address. Inside was a photograph of her brother behind prison bars, and a handwritten note that said simply, "He saved you. Remember that." She burned the note that same day. But she kept the photograph. Because some debts can never be repaid. And some prisons have no walls at all. If you made it this far, you've just witnessed the truth about America's most secure facility. But this is just one story. There are hundreds more buried in those walls, and I'm going to tell every single one of them. Subscribe now, because what's coming next will make this look like a bedtime story.